everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and today we're gonna unlock the secrets and the mystery of the one Land Aether Vial hands. Now, this is gonna be a really important video because I wholeheartedly believe that the single most critical decision anyone's ever gonna make in a game of Magic the Gathering is their first one. Do you keep or do you mulligan your hand? Because that one decision can mean everything. It is the difference between having a potentially winning or completely losing hand. And of course, if you mulligan too far, you're going to be so far low on resources that you can't catch up. But then there are some hands that are so good, but people do not understand the principles, the reasons why they're good, so they mulligan them away. So I would love to give 5 principles today about why you should keep or mulligan your Aether Vial hands. So let's start off by analyzing this one land Aether Vial hand. We've got a Mutavault Aether Vial, 4 Lords, and a Merfolk Trickster. Now, usually I'm pretty excited to see a lot of Lords because that is where we are going to get a lot of damage and potentially aggro out our opponent. However, this hand is quite terrible, and the fundamental reason why is because if we are starting off with a Aether Vial on turn 1, then we don't have anything to play on turn 2, because the Aether Vial will have 1 counter on it, and then by turn 3, that's when we're going to start putting creatures into play. And then our very first attack is going to happen by turn 4. I think that's pretty slow for Modern, don't you think? And because our only land is a Mutavault, even if we top deck an island, we cannot cast any of the cards in our hand. So this is a pretty terrible hand. It is one of the main examples that you would want to mulligan a sort of hand like this. But let's change it up a little bit. Let's add some Silvergills to the equation. And let's say, for the sake of argument, we are on the draw. The main difference in this hand is that we've got some Silvergill Adepts over some Lords and other double blue spells. Is this a keep or is this a mulligan? And in my opinion, this here is a keep. And the first principle I want to go over is you gotta have cards to cast when you draw your second land. If you aren't planning to play 2 cards a turn, your 1 land Vial hand is just too slow for Modern. So at least in this case, we might be starting off with an Aether Vial on turn 1 with just a Mutavault, but if we draw an island, then we can play Silvergill Adept. And then on turn 3, we can play another Silvergill Adept, put a Lord in play, and we even get to attack that turn. And then we have a lot of creatures on the battlefield by the time that we are attacking with our first Lord on turn 4. It's a completely different situation. So when you are deciding to keep your hand, make sure it has cards that you are capable of casting when you draw the second land drop. Because what's the point of having Aether Vial if you can't play multiple things a turn? If you can't play multiple things a turn, then your Aether Vial hand is just slowing you down. You know, starting the game on turn 3, attacking by turn 4 is not where you want to be. So we've already addressed why this hand is not so good. This is the hand that is going to start the game on turn 3, attack by turn 4. Way too slow. So why don't we start throwing some stuff that we can play on turn 2, or also cards that we can play with 1 mana. So we play the Aether Vial on turn 1 with the Mutavault, but now we actually have a little bit of interaction in the form of Dismember. So if our opponent plays a creature, we at least can slow the game down to a point where we can start to catch up. So now we're adding more things that we can do on turn 2. And the second principle I want to talk about is have something to cast or put into play by turn 2. If you go 1 land Aether Vial and on turn 2 you do nothing, you might be so far behind now in Modern. Because of the London Mulligan, people can mulligan to their most aggressive, most high pressure hands, where they're going to do something on turn 1, then they're going to do something on turn 2, they're going to do something on turn 3. You don't want to be completely tempoed out. So I like this hand. Turn 1 I go Aether Vial, turn 2 I can Vial in a Benthic Biomancer, and on top of that, at any time I have access to Dismember with my Mutavault. I think this hand is very good. This is a keep because of what we can do by turn 2. And don't forget that other interaction could be in the form of Force of Negation, because being able to stall your opponent, maybe by the means of countering any of, like, for example, Expedition Map, countering Sylvan Scrying, those things are still very useful, and so long as you have some way of playing the game and interacting by turn 2, I think is good. So Force Negation as a counterspell also helps a hand like this. And the same thing applies if you've got sideboard cards. So if you've got your Grafdigger's Cage, if you have your Relic of Progenitus, even though you don't put any even if you didn't put any creatures in play by turn 2, as long as you're getting your cards onto the battlefield, I think that's fine as well. So let's take a little break here, and I'd like to ask you, how would you rate this hand out of 5 waves? How many waves would you give this? Is this a good hand? Is this a bad hand? What would you rate this hand? We've got a Breeding Pool, an Aether Vial, 3 Lords, and 2 Kamena Speaker. Let me know your thoughts below. And in my opinion, this is a spectacular hand. This is worth 5 waves easily. It is one of the most powerful 1-land hands you could have with Merfolk. On turn 1, you're going to play Aether Vial. On turn 2, even if you don't draw another land, you're going to put 2 creatures in play, 2 Kamena Speakers. And then by turn 3, you will at least put a Lord in play and attack for 6. If you draw a land, you're going to attack for 8. And then by turn 3, you can put another Lord in play and attack for a lot. And if you get to play 2 more Lords, I mean, you're attacking way over 20 damage. So this has a potential turn 4 kill. It's capable of putting a lot of creatures in play. I mean, the idea is that we've got multiple of these cards that we can play on turn 2 through the Aether Vial and our mana. And also, we've got a really good payoff if we draw an island to cast Lord of Atlantis and put the rest of our Lords into play with Aether Vial. I think this hand is fantastic. It's one of the best 1-land hands you could ask for. Now let's talk a little bit about play and the draw. A lot of those situations we talked about really benefit you on the draw. For example, if you need to draw a land to play multiple spells, being on the draw is very good. But let's talk a little bit about the play. We've got this 1-lander, we've got a million Lords, and we're just 1 island away from casting a creature and putting a creature in play with Aether Vial. Is this a keep or a mulligan? And in my opinion, I think it's a mulligan. Slow 1-land Vial hands on the play, unless the matchup allows you to be patient, which means some form of attrition-based matchups or control matchups, you can do better at a proactive 6. This hand is like, okay, but I think we could do a lot better. Because of the London Mulligan, we can be a little bit more greedy and have a way more proactive hand. When you're on the play, the odds that you're going to draw your second land drop by turn 2 is not that good. When you're on the draw, it is, because you get to draw a card for the turn for your first turn, then you get to draw a card for your second turn. So you have 2 draws at getting that second land drop. On the play, you do not. I do not think that this hand is worthwhile. You could say, hey, being on the play and having an Aether Vial with 1 counter on it is better than being on the draw, having an Aether Vial in play with 0 counters on it. That could be true, but I think we can do a lot better when we are on the play. Why keep a clunky hand when you know your deck can curve out a lot smoother and have much more impactful, powerful starts? So, in my opinion, in the age of the London Mulligan, we should mulligan this and look for a more proactive 6. So now we're going to look at what we should do when we mulligan to 5 or 4, like when we are posed with a position of keeping this Aether Vial or not. And on the play, I think it's very enticing to maybe toss away a land and one of the creatures, we keep the Aether Vial and we can vial in creatures with it. But here's the problem. You're on 1 land with Aether Vial, you're down on resources, and the issue is the longer a game goes, the more card advantage is going to matter than card quality. So if the game, for example, drags on to turn 10, then the fact that your opponent has two more cards than you at the start of the game is going to have a huge impact because you're just way down on cards. Solution, you've got to beat them before they can make use of their card advantage. You want to be able to kill them while they still have those cards in their hand. And if you start off with Aether Vial, if you start this thing with the play, what are you going to do on turn 2 when you don't draw your land? You're going to put a Benthic Biomancer in play. And then you'll Vial in the Lord by turn 3 and start attacking by turn 2. There is a better way. You should keep the lands. That way, you can go turn 1 Benthic Biomancer, turn 2 Lord, attack for 2, turn 3 Lord, attack for 6. That's a very big difference. Then turn 2 attack for nothing, turn 3 attack for 2. If you keep the Aether Vial hand, you do 2 damage by turn 3. If you keep the lands hand, you do 8 damage by turn 3. The 2 damage on turn 2 and the 6 on turn 3. This gives you the best chance of winning the game before your opponent can take advantage of their card advantage. So principle number 4 is don't keep 1 land and a vial on a mulligan to 5 or less. Because the lower you go down on cards, you got to keep hands that will give you the fastest clock. Aether Vial is clunky with 1 land. So here's another example, and it's got some good features that we talked about before. We have something to do on turn 2 with Dismember. We have something to do if we draw an island with Spreading Seas. And even if we draw an island, we might be able to Spreading Seas our Mutavault so that we can actually cast the Deprives in hand. But there's actually something fundamentally bad about this hand, and that is there's nothing to put in play with Aether Vial. The only thing that we have is a 3-drop. So principle number 5 is don't keep hands that don't utilize Aether Vial. Don't keep them. This hand is basically all spells, and you know what? An all spell hand might be fine, but it's not for Aether Vial. So don't keep these risky 1 land hands. 1 land Vial hands do have some risk, but don't keep them if you have no creatures to put in play with them. Alright, so now that I've given you all 5 principles about how I play with 1 land Aether Vial hands, let's talk about some examples. So we're on the play versus humans. What do you think about this hand? We've got a bunch of lords, we have Merfolk Trickster, we've got Spreading Seas. Is this a keep or a mulligan? If you want to participate, let me know in the comments section below. Don't cheat! Don't cheat. Don't retract any of your answers. We've got 5 exercises. This is the first one. Is this a keep or a mulligan? And the answer is that I believe it's a mulligan. See, this hand is very slow and clunky against an aggro deck. This is the type of hand I think you want to mulligan to be a lot more leaner. Against a deck like humans, they're going to have something to put in play by turn 1. By turn 2, they'll probably start attacking you, assuming they didn't have their own Aether Vial. Then by turn 3, they're going to have a ton of stuff on the board, and they're going to start throwing haymakers. When you're on the play, I cannot reliably assume I'm going to draw a land by turn 2, because you only have 1 draw step. I can feel I'm willing to gamble, and I feel somewhat reliable I can get a second land drop if I have 2 draw steps to my second turn, but not 1. So I'm not doing anything on turn 2 with this hand. Nothing. And then by turn 3, I will put something in play, but it already might be too late. I think this is a good example of mulliganing for a more proactive 6-card hand, especially against another deck that is trying to race me. So exercise number 2, we've got, we're on the play against Blue-White Control, and we've got another interesting hand, Mutavault, Aether Vial, Meregery, 2 Lords, Merfolk Trickster, and a Force of Negation. Is this a keep or a mulligan? And the answer is, this is a keep. I think this is a fine hand to have on the play against Blue-White Control. The hand is clunky, but the matchup is a lot slower, and you can have time to catch up, even if, what are they going to do? Turn 1 Colonnade, turn 2 nothing, hold up Mana Leak mana. The first thing they're going to do is probably play Teferi Time Raveler. I mean, Mutavault can even be an advantage in this hand. I mean, it's not blue mana that we can use to cast something like Merfolk Trickster, but it is. I think it's something that they have to burn a Field of Ruin on anyway, which would give us blue mana. And if they don't have that Field of Ruin, this is just something that can attack those planeswalkers like Teferi when the time comes up, and we have interaction. We have interaction for the planeswalkers. Either Teferi, Narset, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, with Force of Negation. And even if we play out our hand very slowly, we're going to have time. It's not a problem. And you know what? Also in this matchup, they've got plenty of Path to Exiles. So as we get creatures in play, they're going to ramp up our hand. They're going to give us the mana to cast things later on anyway, including like Mararejuri. So it's not even guaranteed that we need to put Aether Vial to 3 with this sort of hand. So I believe that this is a keep. Alright, so this is exercise 3 versus Tron on the draw. Is this a keep or a mulligan? We've got Cavern of Souls, we've got an Aether Vial, Kumena Speaker, Master of the Pearl Trident, a Deprive, and 2 Spreading Seizes. So far, we don't got the mana for Deprive or the Spreading Seizes, but does that matter? We're on the draw. Is this a keep or a mulligan? And in my opinion, this is a keep. In fact, I think this hand has a little bit of risk, because if you don't draw that island, you're probably screwed. You're probably dead. But this hand is still very, very good. I think the clock is good. You see, you definitely have something to play on turn 2, no matter what, with Kumena Speaker. And you also have 2 draws to draw an island to cast Spreading Seas, which is excellent in the matchup. And I think if you do draw that island, you're very likely to win unless they have Nature's Claim, because you're going to Spreading Seas one of their Tron lands, and you've got a backup one next turn. So even if they keep playing the Tron lands, you've got another way to slow down that game. And as you start rolling out Kumena Speaker into another Lord, as you draw 2 drops from your deck, you can cast the Spreading Seas while also putting creatures in play with the Aether Vial. So I think this is a good hand to keep on the draw. So here is the quintessential 1-land Vial hand against Jund on the draw. This hand is dangerous. It's put a lot of fear into the Merfolk community, because what if they Thoughtseize us? What if they Inquisition? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? They're gonna take our Aether Vial, and then we're dead. So we've got a Mutavault, we've got Aether Vial, we've got Merfolk Trickster, Master of the Pearl Trident, which is gonna depend on this Aether Vial, mind you. But we've got good cards in the matchup with Silver Gill-Adept, and Spreading Seas. We're on the draw. Is this a keep or a mulligan? In my opinion, and I have stuck to this story for years, this is absolutely a keep. Do not be afraid of Thoughtseize, alright? Taking a mulligan will make your hand even more vulnerable versus hand disruption. This hand just needs one more island and it goes off completely. And even if they have the Thoughtseize or Inquisition, this is a good hand on the draw. I mean, if I had to mulligan to 6, and I would be happy to keep this without the Aether Vial, because I have a really good hand that can catch up, especially with card advantage like Silver Gill-Adept and Spreading Seas, because I only need one more island and I have 2 draws to find it. I think this hand is in good shape. If anything, like, this would be a perfect hand to have after they've Thoughtseized me, because it has the most potential to come back. And if they don't have Inquisition or Thoughtseize, this hand is great anyway. So we get the Aether Vial in play, and we're going to be super high in the plus. Trickster is going to be good against Tarmogoyf. We got Spreading Seas and Master of the Pearl Trident. And then when we draw our island, we can play Silver Gill-Adept and play our other 2 drops at the same time. So it's got... I don't think there's a lot of risk to this hand, but I do think there's a lot of risk mulliganing this sort of hand against an attrition-based matchup. So I am... maybe there's still some debate about this, but I think this is a clear keep on the draw. If this hand was only double blue drops, we're talking like this with Merfolk Trickster, Master of the Pearl Trident, Merfolk Trickster, Lord of Atlantis, I think that's a mulligan. I think if you have no chance of playing creatures off of an island, then I think it's a mulligan. I think that would be a fair mulligan. But because we've got so many cards, and I think we only need 2, like a Silver Gill-Adept and Spreading Seas would be enough for me. Because we have so many cards that we can play off of 1 blue mana, and they're high and they're good in the matchup, I think this is a keep on the draw. So this is our last exercise, exercise 5, versus Neoform on the play, the super dangerous deck that can win on turn 1, usually wins on turn 2. We've got Mutavault, Aether Vial, Mirror Regery, 2 Force and Negations, 2 Deprives. Is this a keep or a mulligan? What do you think? And this is probably going to be our final lesson for today. This is a keep. Now, I know this hand goes against almost all the principles that I've talked about. I mean, you do have something to play on turn 2, but it's like a bad Aether Vial hand because of the Mirror Regery, and we can't cast any of these Deprives because we don't have an island. But Force of Negation is so good in the Neoform matchup. I mean, it's possible that 5 turns will go by, they're going to go for it, you Force a Negation, they Veil of Summer, you Force a Negate the Veil of Summer, and then the game's basically over because they've got no more cards left. This is the key, because most of the time this hand is terrible, but against Neoform, it will be very hard for them to beat 2 counter spells. This is an example where there is an exception to every rule. I've given you 5 good principles to lean on when judging whether you should keep or mulligan a hand, but pending the matchup, pending the situation, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the cards that you've drawn changes that situation. So, be willing to be a little bit flexible. I know Force Negation is so good in this matchup. I would keep this hand if I didn't have Aether Vial. If this was just a 1 Mutavault hand, I would definitely keep this. 100%. I would play my Mutavault like it was my creature played on turn 1 and just wait for more lands to attack with it. So that's how strong I think Force and Negation is in this matchup. And if you might have other sort of cards that are so high impact in a matchup that entice you to keep it, even when you have a 1-land Vial hand, then maybe that's just what you got to do. So wasn't that enlightening? If you learned something, let me know in the comments section below. And please do like and share this video with someone you think could find it valuable. Anyway, this has been Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and I will see you next time.